The Superlocrian mode is a major scale with a root, a flat second, a flat third, a flat fourth, a flat five, a flat six, and a flat seven. Now this mode is used very often against dominant seventh chords. So against a G7, I could play the G Superlocrian mode. Now another way to think of the Superlocrian is to think of the melodic minor scale, which is one half step or one fret above the chord you're playing. So in other words, G, Superlocrian mode, would contain the same notes as A flat, melodic minor. Let me show you some of the fingerings for the Superlocrian mode. If I'm playing with the root on the sixth string, the Superlocrian mode is played in this way. And if I go beyond the octave, the Superlocrian mode with the root on the fifth string is fingered this way. The Superlocrian mode is used to improvise over 7 chords with an altered ninth. For example, over a G7 flat 9, you could play the G Superlocrian mode. This next example does just that. Exercise number 189 contains a spot where there's a G7 flat 9, and over that portion of the solo, I'll play the G Superlocrian mode. The term arpeggio refers to playing the notes of the chord one at a time rather than playing simultaneously. So this would be an arpeggio, for example, of an E minor 7 chord. See, the notes are played separately rather than played at the same time. Now, arpeggios are a very important part of soloing in jazz guitar. What you have to remember is that whatever chord is being played, that's the chord you have to arpeggiate in your solo. Now, there's a pattern for every different kind of an arpeggio form, and these patterns are found in the book on page 173. The little squares with the numbers by them refer to patterns that we're going to be using in the solos and in some of the exercises. Now, what you have to work on doing is connecting these patterns together, but what I would recommend doing first is playing each pattern from the low strings to high, and then reversing the order while you go down chromatically. For example, I'm going to use the E minor 7 pattern, which is the minor 7 form number 3 with the root on the 5th string, and I'm going to play from the low note. Then I would go down a half step and play the same pattern, descending. So you can see, move each pattern down a fret, so you get used to moving the arpeggio pattern around, and your fingers get used to that form. Now I'm going to play exercise number 195, which shows how some of the arpeggio patterns connect. This will connect an A minor 7 to a D7 to a G major 7. The A minor 7 pattern, which I'll use, is the minor 7 arpeggio pattern number 1, and then the D7 will be the arpeggio pattern number 3 for the 7th chord, and then for G major 7, I'll be using the major 7 arpeggio pattern number 1. Now, by connecting those together, I can create a solo. This is exercise number 195. Also, notice that this is the 2-5-1 progression, which is probably the most common chord progression in all of jazz. Exercise number 198 connects an E minor 7 to an A7 to a D major 7. The E minor 7 with the minor 7 form number 3, the A7 with the A7 arpeggio pattern number 1, and the D major 7 using the arpeggio pattern number 3. In exercise number 200, each chord is arpeggiated. And this is not a very common practice when you're soloing, but this is a great exercise to learn how to connect your arpeggio patterns together. Exercise number 200. In this next example, I'm going to use arpeggios in the solo. So there will be a combination of scales and arpeggios. This is in the key of C, and in the book, on exercise 201, the places where the arpeggios occur, those spots have been circled. In this next example, the basic arpeggio forms have been augmented and other notes have been added to them to arpeggiate more complex chords. For example, over the A9 chord, I'll be using the A9 arpeggio. In this case, I've taken the A7 arpeggio, which is this, and located the interval of the ninth around that arpeggio pattern, the ninth being here and here, and inserted those notes into the seventh arpeggio pattern to come up with an A9 arpeggio, which would look like this. In example number 204, there are some places where the chords that are arpeggiated are augmentations of just the basic arpeggio forms. In the same way that the scales were sequenced earlier, arpeggios can also be sequenced. You take a portion of the arpeggio and then repeat that sequence again, going through ascending the arpeggio, continuing on through the arpeggio pattern. Exercise number 217 contains several spots where there are arpeggio sequences. In the book, those spots have been circled so that you can see them easily. Targeting is a term which refers to playing notes around the chord tone and then playing the chord tone. For example, if the chord I was playing was an A minor, which played here, I could target the notes of the A minor by playing the chord tone, one of the chord tones, then a fret below, then playing the chord tone again, and repeating this on each note of the chord, like. Another form of targeting would be to play the chord tone, then one fret below the chord tone, one fret above the chord tone, and then the chord tone again, so I would get this. This can be an effective tool when it's used in your solo. In the next example, on number 225, I'm going to play a scale to do most of the improvisation, but you'll hear a couple of spots where some targeting has been used. Again, those spots in the book have been circled so you can see them easily. A guide tone is a note which is played right at the end of a measure and introduces the first note of the next measure. This is particularly effective when the chords are being changed because the guide tone introduces the new chord. It's most always 1 fret away or a half step away from the chord which is following the guide tone. Now, a common use of guide tones is to play on the last of the measure for a particular chord. On the last note that you play the note which is a third of that chord. So for example, for an A7 chord, make the last note that you play in that measure the third of the chord, which would be right here. Then that introduces the seventh of the next chord, D, for example, which is just 1 fret below that. So it's very common for the third of one chord to go to the seventh of the next chord. So for the A7, I would play this note last. Then when the chord goes to D, I would make this the first note in my solo. Okay? So I'm going to play a blues in the key of A. A very crucial element of playing jazz guitar is learning how to phrase. And phrasing refers to the length of the notes and the spaces where there are pauses or breaks between the notes. So when a group of notes are played and then a pause occurs, that area where the notes are played, that's called a phrase. Now the length of the phrases can vary, and the rhythms that you use in those phrases can vary. Let me give you some hints that will help you to learn how to phrase. One way you can learn to phrase is by playing an original melody, the rhythm of that melody, only playing different notes. For example, if I were playing this melody, if this were my original melody, 2, 3, 4, 1, I might play the same exact rhythm as that original melody, but use different notes, like this, a 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So you see, I played the same rhythm, but used different notes. And this is a good way to learn how to phrase because the original melody will probably contain some nice phrases right in the tune. Another way to learn how to phrase is learn some common jazz rhythms and how to put those rhythms together to create what we call phrases. I'm going to play a whole series of short jazz rhythms for you. These are contained in the book on page 203. And I'm going to play each rhythm one time so you can see how the rhythm sounds and get the feel of that rhythm. This is number 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 2. Number 3. Number 4. Number 5. Number 6. Number 7. Number 8, number 9, number 10, number 11, number 12, number 13. number 14, number 15, number 16, number 17, number 18, number 19, number 20, number 21, number 22, number 23, number 24, number 25, and number 26, number 27, number 28, number 29, number 30, number 31, number 32, number 33, number 34, and number 35. Now when you put these different short jazz rhythms together, combine them together, you can come up with phrases. This next example shows you how that is done. A good way to use these short jazz rhythms is at the end of a string of eighth notes, or at the beginning of a string of eighth notes. In this next solo, you can hear that done. You'll hear measures where you'll hear just eighth note passages, and then at the end of the eighth notes, you'll hear one of the jazz rhythms. For example, like you might hear this rhythm. Now at the end of the eighth notes, you heard one of those jazz rhythms, then a break, that would be the phrase, and then on to another series of eighth notes or another jazz rhythm. In this next example, you can hear those rhythms used to create the phrases. A good technique used to learn to construct a solo would be to play one note per measure and make that note be a chord tone. So that's the first step. For example, if the chords were A minor and D for the first two measures, I could play one note in a measure, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, but that note would be a tone which is in the chord. The next step would be to play two notes per measure, but have both of those notes be chord tones. For example, for the measure of A minor 7 and D7, I could play. The next step is to play four notes per measure and have the note on the first beat of the measure be a chord tone, and then the other notes that are used can come from the scale of the key we're in. So for the same A minor 7 to D7, I could play. The next step is to play 8 notes per measure, again focusing on the first and possibly the third beat of the measure to make sure that those are chord tones. So now I'm going to play exercise number 254. I'm going to be playing 8 notes per measure. I'm going to be using the scale of the key that I'm in, But the first note of the measure I'm going to focus on and make that a chord tone, a note that's in the chord. In this next example, you're going to hear the concept of constructing a solo by playing a chord tone on the first beat of the measure, but you'll also hear some of the jazz rhythms that we used earlier. This is exercise number 255. To improvise around a given melody is one of the most sophisticated and flattering forms of improvisation. The first step, and this could not necessarily be used on every melody, but it can certainly be used to improvise around some melodies. The first step would be to alter the rhythm of the original melody so that the melody swings and it opens up some more spaces in between the notes where you can insert some improvisation. In this next example, I'm going to play "She'll Be Coming Around the Mountain." But instead of playing it straight like this, you're going to hear me change the rhythm a little bit to open up the melody and allow some more spaces for improvisation. Example number 275, a kind of a swing version of "She'll Be Coming Around the Mountain." The next step is to locate the gaps in the melody, or the holes in between the notes of the melody, which are created by long notes